If I could start out sort of with the topic of the day, and that's the anonymous op-ed in the New York Times. The president said on Friday that he thought it would be a good idea for Jeff Sessions to look into this. Is there anything about what was published by the New York Times that would warrant an investigation by the Department of Justice?
Certainly, if there's an individual, whether or not, since we don't know who they are, if that individual is in meetings where national security is being discussed or other important topics, and they are attempting to undermine the executive branch, that would certainly be problematic and something that the Department of Justice should look into.
So would that be a suggestion of misuse of classified information? I mean, what realm would that fall in?
Once again, it's something that the Department of Justice should simply look into, and that's for them to make that determination.
And I just have one quick follow-up on that, if I could. Is the White House actively trying to find out who this person is, or do you not really care and you're moving on to other things?
We're certainly focused on things that actually matter, and the staff here that is here to do their job and not undermine the great work that this president and this administration has done. And we're going to continue focusing on that. It's frankly, I think, sad and pathetic that a gutless, anonymous source could receive so much attention from the media. And I think that the American people would be much better served if we actually spent some time talking about some of the really important things that are facing our country and the things that this administration is doing to help fix them. Justin.
Has the president received the Kim Jong-un letter from the State Department? If so, can you share any details about the content or tone, or if there were any commitments or requests from the North Korean leader?
Yeah, the president has received the letter from Kim Jong-un. It was a very warm, very positive letter. We won't release the full letter unless the North Korean leader agrees that we should. The primary purpose of the letter was to request and look to schedule another meeting with the president, which we are open to and are already in the process of coordinating that. The recent parade in North Korea, for once, was not about their nuclear arsenal. The president has achieved tremendous success with his policies so far, and this letter was further evidence of progress in that relationship. A number of things that have taken place. The remains have come back. The hostages have returned. There's been no testing of missiles or nuclear material, and of course the historic summit between the two leaders. And this letter is just further indication of the progress that we hope to continue to make.
The expectation that that second meeting would be here in Washington. I know that's something that the president.
We'll let you know when we have further details, but certainly something that we want to take place, and we'll already continue to work on making that happen.
To follow up on that, you mentioned the remains being returned, the hostages, the lack of testing, which were all happening when the president cited a lack of progress and canceled Secretary Pompeo's trip. So other than these really nice words from Kim and a parade, what signs of progress warrant this new optimism from President Trump?
Again, certainly the most recent parade this weekend, one of the first times, I believe, that they have had parades similar where they weren't highlighting their nuclear arsenal. We consider that a sign of good faith. And again, the letter from Kim Jong-un to the president certainly showed a commitment to continuing conversations, continuing to work on the progress that they have had since their meeting just a few months ago, and also a continued commitment to focus on denuclearization of the peninsula.
I have a separate question on Bob Woodward, because President Trump continues to call him a liar and says his book is completely a work of fiction. He's also mentioned libel laws quite a bit. Is President Trump considering filing a lawsuit against Woodward?
Certainly keep you posted on that, but I think we've been extremely clear from the beginning. Many of the book's sources have already spoken out to refute. A couple of them, Chief of Staff John Kelly, aggressively pushed back in this. General Mattis aggressively pushing back in the claims. John Dowd also pushing back against the things that are attributed to him. And a number of people have come out and said that Woodward never even reached out to corroborate statements that were attributed to them, which seems incredibly reckless for a book to make such outrageous claims, to not even take the time to get a $10 fact checker to call around and verify that some of these quotes were happened. When no effort was made, it seems like a very careless and reckless way to write a book. John?
Sarah, the president said that he was looking into whether or not to take action against the New York Times for publishing the anonymous op-ed. Does the president not think that that op-ed is protected by the First Amendment? Does he really think that the federal government should contemplate action against a newspaper for publishing an article?
I think it's less about that part of it and whether or not somebody is actively trying to undermine the executive branch of the government and a duly elected president of the United States. If they don't want to be part of that process, they shouldn't be here. See?
If I guess, he tweeted earlier, and it's been a while since we've had a chance to talk to you, so this goes back a little while, but he tweeted last week that suggesting that the Justice Department should not be investigating, should not be prosecuting those 2 Republican congressmen because it might hurt Republican chances in November. Is the president really trying to suggest or outright saying that the Justice Department shouldn't be investigating or prosecuting allies of the president if it might hurt his party's political chances?
Certainly, the president thinks that no one is above the law. What he would like to see is a fair playing field, that there also be, there have been a number of concerns raised about individuals, both in the FBI and the Department of Justice, that have been ignored, and we'd like to see those looked at as well. Steve?
But with those 2 prosecutions, he doesn't want to go forward because they're his allies?
I can't weigh in right now on an active investigation, but I can tell you that the president doesn't think anyone is above the law, and we're simply stating that there should be cause for concern of a number of things that have happened both in the Department of Justice and the FBI that we'd like to see those looked at as well.
Back to North Korea, how soon would you like to have this second meeting?
I don't have any specifics on the exact timing, as these conversations for the second meeting are taking place now, and as we have more details, I'll certainly let you know.
Could you just update us on where the Canada trade talks stand?
We continue to have ongoing conversations with the Canadians and are still hopeful that we'll come to an agreement with them. Jeff?
Sarah, do you know if the president believes these denials that have been coming in from some of his top advisors, or does he believe that it's someone from within? And does he believe that lie detector tests should be issued, as the vice president volunteered to do on Sunday?
No lie detectors are being used or talked about or looked at as a possibility. Frankly, the White House and the staff here are focused on doing our jobs and trying to show up here every day and do what we can to help better the American people, not deal with cowards that refuse to put their names in an anonymous letter.
He tweeted something on Friday after George Papadopoulos was sentenced. He said 14 days for $28 million, $2 million a day, no collusion. What was he talking about, the $28 million?
I'd have to go back and check and look at that. I didn't see that. Sorry.
The price tag of the Rush investigation? Because if so, that's highly inflated.
Again, I'd have to check, Jeff. I'm not sure of that reference. Sorry.
Decision if he'll testify yet or not? If I can just follow that as
That's a question I refer you to outside counsel. David?
Going to Pennsylvania tomorrow. What does he plan to say, and what does he hope to accomplish with this year's 9/11 address?
Certainly the focus will be on remembering that horrific day and remembering the lives that were lost, and certainly honoring the individuals who were not only lost that day but also put their lives on the line to help in that process. He'll be there, and the vice president will be here in Washington, D.C. at the Pentagon. David?
Sarah, thank you very much. I'm assuming you've read Bob Woodward's book. I know a lot of us have. Can we expect, other than repeating denials from General Mattis, General Kelly, John Dowd, can we expect the White House to give us a list of all the things in the book that are wrong and that qualify Woodward to be a liar?
I think that would be a complete and utter waste of our time,
Okay,
so
well,
no.
Hold on a second. Because then that goes to this Quinnipiac poll that came out today that says 55% of Americans believe that the op-ed writer in the Times is right. And the president's getting a 60% negative rating on the honest and truthful. 60% of Americans think he's a dishonest person. So does the president think he can actually win a credibility battle with Bob Woodward, who's an august member of the press corps, helped take Richard Nixon down, and is a legend. How can he win that credibility battle?
Once again, I think I would certainly rather take the actual on-record account from people who are here, who have been working in this building, who have interacted with the president day in, day out, like General Mattis, like General Kelly, like myself, not disgruntled former employees that refuse to put their name on things when they come out to attack the president. I think that those are far more credible sources and certainly far more reliable voices within this administration, and that can accurately tell what's taken place in the building behind
Is
me.
the president still a credible voice?
Absolutely, John.
Thanks a lot, Sarah. You've said a lot, the president has said a lot about the publication of this op-ed. You've called it, the president has called it a betrayal. You've called it an act of disloyalty. But the president, as has been mentioned quite a few times, even here in this briefing, has called on the Department of Justice to investigate the publication of this op-ed. There is no violation of the criminal code that goes along with the publication of this op-ed, so I'm a little curious as to what it is that the president believes may have been violated in the law as it relates to the publication of this op-ed piece.
Once again, we would consider someone who is actively trying to undermine the executive branch of our government inappropriate and something certainly to cause concern, and they should take a look at it.
What's the criminal violation then?
Well, once again, we're just saying that this gives a great level of concern, and they should look into it.
It's not a violation of the law.
Sorry?
Just being concerned is not a violation of law. I'm just
So
looking to see.
I'm not an attorney, it's the Department of Justice to make that determination, and we're asking them to look into it and make that determination, and they certainly are fully capable of doing that. But someone actively trying to undermine the duly elected president and the entire executive branch of government, that seems quite problematic to me and something that they should take a look at. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Just to try to specify this a bit, is the White House treating the anonymous op-ed writer as a full-fledged breach of security matter, and is the FBI investigating both staff and their means of communications, cell phones and computers and the like?
I'm not aware of that level. That wouldn't be something I would be a part of. But certainly, as I just told your colleague, we think that there is a concern here and it should be looked into. David?
One other question.
Sorry, go ahead, John.
Did the, obviously the whole world watched when Jair Bolsonaro, the front-running Brazilian presidential candidate, was stabbed last week. Has the president called or sent any statement to his family at all?
I'm not aware that the president has, but I do believe members of the administration have reached out, and I'll work to get you the specifics of who that was. David?
Sarah, what does the president make of all of this talk of the 25th Amendment and some of what he hears on media outlets regarding the word crazy talk? It seems like there's a lot of talk about that on many of the mainstream media outlets.
I think we would say that it's about as ridiculous as most of Bob Woodward's book. The fact that that's actually being honestly discussed is ridiculous, and frankly, it's insulting to the nearly 62 million people that came out and overwhelmingly supported this president, voted for him, supported his agenda, and are watching and cheering on as he successfully implements that agenda every single day. Sager.
Thanks, Sarah. Can you give us a sense of what documents the president is considering for declassification sometime in the next 2 weeks, and when exactly can we expect them?
When we have specifics on that, we'll let you know.
Give us a sense of what the documents are, though.
I can't get into that right now, but when we have an announcement on it, I'll certainly let you know. Stephen?
Sarah, I want to ask you about the Mideast peace process, because today the State Department announced it is going to close the Palestinian mission here in Washington. The Palestinian ambassador to the U.S. accuses this country of murdering the peace process and undermining its role in the peace process. The State Department says that it's not retreating from our efforts to achieve a lasting and comprehensive peace. Which is it, and how is the United States still an honest broker in this process?
Certainly, we've been very upfront throughout the process in the fact that we want to see peace. We want to have those conversations. We want to help broker that deal. And we're going to continue pushing forward. Beyond that, I don't have anything specific on it today.
Close the office. The Palestinians are saying that the U.S. can no longer be an honest broker. This is another example, they say, of the fact that the U.S. is too aligned with Israel. Is that not the case?
Certainly, we have a great deal of support with our friend and ally in Israel. But again, we are as committed today as we've ever been to the peace process. Holly?
Thank you. On Friday, President talked about a new deal with trade deal with India. What kind of agreement, trade agreement he is talking about? What kind of agreement he wants with India?
I know that a number of administration officials just recently came back from India. They expressed their willingness to negotiate new and better trade deals, and those conversations are at the beginning stages, and we'll certainly keep you posted as we get further in the process. Hallie?
Thank you, Sarah. I have one on the ICC, but I want to follow up on Stephen's question on the peace process here. And just, you say the door continues to be open and that you're still working on it, but is it realistic for the president to believe he can actually achieve peace in the Middle East in his first term in office, as he's promised to do, something that his son-in-law is working on as well, when the administration has taken steps that Palestinians themselves have said do not help?
Again, certainly we are very much committed to the process, and we're still hopeful we can get there.
The ICC, John Bolton today said that the administration would sanction the International Criminal Court, which is a move that seems to be a reversion to sort of Bush-era policies. Is it fair to say that this administration is now shifting toward a more hardline stance toward the ICC? And if, in fact, it is so feckless, then why is the U.S. so concerned?
Certainly, the president is committed to defending our national sovereignty and all of our security interests, which would include using any means necessary to protect our citizens, those of our allies, from unjust prosecution by the ICC. Their announcement that they would consider opening an investigation into, among other parties, U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan is a threat to American sovereignty. And if they proceed with that, then the United States would consider those options that Ambassador Bolton laid out today.
So why the concern? If the ICC is in fact dead to you, as John Bolton said today, then what is the concern that the U.S. has if in fact they do not move
because
forward?
they
with
told us they
Afghanistan?
were on the verge of making that decision, and we're letting them know our position ahead of them making that decision. We'll take one last question. David?
Sarah, the editor of the Global Times, which is Beijing's premier foreign policy outlet, wrote on Twitter today that the president blames China on North Korea quite a bit, but now that there seems to be some improvement in North Korea's stance, does China deserve some credit? He suggested that they do. What do you think about that? Does China now deserve credit? Does the president believe China's acting better?
I think that the president deserves the credit in this process. He's been the lead voice and the one that put the initial pressure on North Korea. Certainly, the president has very publicly expressed his gratitude towards President Xi for the role that they played. He would have liked to have seen them continue to step up and do more. Frankly, we'd still like to see them step up and do more, but the credit in this process at this point and where we are, I would say, belongs to President Trump. And we're going to continue to hopefully work with President Xi and his team and his administration to continue making progress.
Given that you're scheduling a second meeting, it sounded like with Kim Jong-un, does the president believe that it's really he has to negotiate this out almost personally with Kim, given that once the two leaders have left, things seem to go poorly, and then they have to reschedule another meeting? Is it?
I don't know that it's gone poorly, considering steps have been taken by the North Koreans to show signs of good faith. Right. But other steps have been taken, so I wouldn't say that it's gone poorly. But at the end of the day, ultimately, it's always going to be best when you can have the two leaders sit down, particularly from the North Korean side. As we know, most of the decisions are going to have to be run through Kim Jong-un. Certainly, he's going to want to talk to his counterpart in President Trump. We think it's important, and we're glad that we're making progress. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.